Welcome back to Man vs. Meeple, the show where we talk about all things board game related. Today we have a Kickstarter preview. It's for Kami-sama. This is from Kolossal Games, and we have from Kolossal Games, Travis Chance and AJ Lambeth. AJ, you are the designer of this game. This is, in fact, your first game, right?
You are correct.
So what's the inspiration for the game?
So I spent a year teaching English in Japan shortly after I graduated from college, and while I was over there, I just kind of fell in love with Shintoism. It was something I'd never seen before growing up in the Midwest. And I pulled the round board design from one of my previous ideas long time ago, or way before that, and kind of applied Shintoism to that and just the ability of combos, because I'm a former Magic player and just love the ability or way that you can combo inside of games.
So what was your first experience with the game? How did you guys hook up originally?
So I had seen the game at a convention, and it was honestly pretty rough at that state. I thought there was something interesting about it, and I could tell that AJ was he was looking to try to make some progress on the game. So I gave him some notes, and then shortly afterward, I had started up Kolossal Games, and then AJ had reached out to me and said, "Hey, thanks. You know, I took some of your ideas, and the game's working a lot better." And then at that time, I was looking for games, so I said, well, yeah, I would love to take. Well, he asked me if I wanted to take a look, and you had it on Tabletopia, so I downloaded Tabletopia, and I very in an old man way learned how to use the interface while he's explaining every shortcut on there. And I saw more of what I thought the game could be, and then so I said, at that point, I said, hey, you know, let's meet up again next week and we'll play again, and we played again, and then after a couple more times of doing that, I said I like the game, and I actually offered AJ a job as the first developer for Kolossal Games, just because he was very passionate about wanting to get into the industry. He clearly was capable of doing the work and putting the effort in, and I was impressed. So he actually moved here from Springfield, Missouri, and we've been working together now for, I don't know,
8 months.
Wow.
You would know too, because we actually played through the game, and it's very fluid. Like it feels like it's a completely 100% developed game. There's a lot of cool interaction in this game. So basically, it's an area control style game. Walk us through like how the game plays and what you're trying to actually do with the board itself.
All right, so the idea of the game is that you're a Japanese spirit and you're trying to control the different spaces on the board. However, unlike a lot of area control games, we're separated into 4 different villages. So while I'm over here in the farming village, David will be in the wealthy village, and you'll be in the fishing, Travis in the holy village over here. So I'm going to use my action cubes. There's an action point allowance system in the game to power my different abilities. Everybody has basic add, remove shrines, and so those are some of the simplest actions you can do. But we also have unique abilities for each of the kami in the game. For example, the water spirit, I have a great control over the river houses, which are right next to the water spaces on the board. And I'll be able to add shrines, remove them, and just kind of spread my influence throughout the village.
So the board's split up into 4 different quadrants, so to speak.
Correct.
And each of these quadrants has how many different locations in them?
There's 15 spaces within each quadrant.
And each of these locations are different types of locations. So you have like water places, you have huts, you have shrines, and these are what players are trying to control, right?
Correct.
And to do that, you're using your action cubes and your shrines to control them. But you can only interact typically with the location that's right in front of you, which is very unique.
Correct.
Each player takes their turn. They're going to use their different abilities, and they're going to be placing shrines into the board. Actually, the board, it's probably hard to see in the video, but the board is actually recessed, so the shrines sit there in the actual board. And what you'll be doing is you'll be taking your whole turn, the next player will take their whole turn, you go around, and then once everybody's taken all their turns, then the board rotates. So now, you know, David would be able to affect what AJ had just set up, etc. And then that you're going to play in each village once, and then there's 3 years, so it's a total of 12 turns. And another thing that I think is pretty interesting and dynamic about the game is that the board doesn't reset each year. So the board grows. So the game starts off super friendly.
It's a very different game, if I remember.
Oh, yeah. So the first round, you can go pretty much anywhere you want, and then suddenly, and you're like, oh, why would I even want to remove anybody's stuff? And then suddenly in the 3rd year, you're like, I have to remove people's stuff, and you get more actions as each year goes by. So you start with 3 actions, 2nd year you get 4 actions, and then the last year, the 3rd year, you have 5 actions. So you do get more powerful as time goes on, but you have to manage those actions in such a way that it creates that sort of opportunity for how you're going to place your shrines, complete the goals, etc.
So how are you scoring points? You're going to be placing these round after round, 4 rounds in a year. How do you score points by placing those shrines? What are you trying to do?
So there are 2 main objectives, because it isn't just about controlling the most spaces on the board, it's about where you go. So one of the main paths to victory is to go in the field and forest spaces over on the sides, which raises your favor in nature tracks. At the end of each year, which is after 4 rounds, you're going to score victory points based on whichever track is the lowest of the 2. So you're trying to balance your connection to man, favor, as well as your connection to the natural world, nature, as you're playing the game.
So you need to raise both of those. You couldn't just raise nature and go heavy on nature, because you're going to only score maybe 1 point on
Favor is the other one.
Yeah.
Exactly.
It's a balancing act that's supposed to be representative of aspects of Shintoism.
Yes.
But there's also objective cards where you're trying to build in specific patterns in some rounds and meeting other goals in different rounds. What are those objectives?
So each year there's going to be a different goal that's up. The first year there's cards that are specific to that first year, but then after that the other goals,
they get harder and more difficult to
yeah. So some of these are kind of just shapes, so patterns. So here, and you could switch this, orient this however, and because the villages are slightly asymmetrical in how things are spread out, it gets kind of more difficult, or more interesting, maybe is a better way of saying it, to complete some of the goals, and that also drives some competition. When you complete a goal in a village, you immediately get the corresponding village token. So here, if we completed this in the farming village, we'd get the farming village token. When you have a set of each of the 4 village tokens, you immediately turn those in and you get 6 points. At the end of the game, these are worth 1 point each, so you're essentially getting a 2-point bonus every time that you can cycle through. So something that I think is really interesting about this is the fact that while this is like an area control, area majority game, which is typically what I call a feel-bad type of game, you have that opportunity to complete a goal and get instant gratification without anyone being able to interrupt. So you can work toward those goals without the fear or disruption of other players, which I think helps to combat that sort of unpleasantness that naturally comes with that mechanism.
And these objectives anybody can complete. Once a player completes that, it's not gone for the round. The next player can complete it, so they can start planning ahead and looking at that and planning the board to hit it when that rotates in front of them.
Yeah, correct. The game allows for a lot of pre-planning, which kind of keeps you involved even when it's not your turn.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
So you were saying too, obviously area majority, area control, but it's not just the number of shrines you have in a space, right? You have to have them connected?
Correct. So connected shrines helps mostly towards goals, but as well as giving you villagers at the end of each round or year.
So once a round is over, what do those villagers do for you?
At the end of each year, we're going to draft villagers based on the number of players, and these are going to give whoever drafts them special bonuses in the game. For example, the Traveler here will give you one of the village tokens, in this case the fishing village, if you were missing that from your collection. Whereas the peasants are only worth half a point and are kind of the trash card in the game.
I see.
Yeah.
So you do want to have the longest chain, since you are going to be the first one to get to draft these cards and get the best one out of the set.
The villagers are intentionally variable. So there's ones that are worth 3 victory points at the end of the game, and they also move you up one of the 2 tracks by 3, which is pretty substantial. So you have that interesting kind of decision matrix within the draft also. Well, I want this guy because then I can complete my set, or I'll set myself up to complete my set next turn. I want this guy because I want to move up the track, etc., etc. So there's essentially, you have the tracks for scoring, you have the villagers, and you have the set collection aspect. Again, what AJ was saying was that it's most contiguous.
So orthogonal chain.
Yeah.
And the players that can draft those cards are only the players that have presence in that location, correct?
Correct.
Do you have to have just one presence, or can you have 1 through 3 presence, or is there a particular amount?
Minimum 1 to be able to draft a card, but the longer your shrine chain, the better chance you're going to get at getting a villager that you prefer.
Interesting.
So one of the cooler aspects of any game for me is variable powers. This one has a ton of that going on, right? With all the different kami.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about how some of these differ from one another.
Okay, so like right in front of me, I have the River Spirit. So she does exceptionally well at handling any stilt houses or water-adjacent houses in each of the villages. She can actually add and remove outside of her current village. So I could be over here messing in the fishing village, even though the farming village is directly in front of me. Ketsugetsu, the rage spirit, whenever his shrines are removed, he gets a little bit more angry. And once it pops off at 4, then he's going to remove people in his immediate village. Kind of has that barbarian thing going on where people can goad him into removing stuff and kind of taking out their opponents. It's just that blind rage.
And he can even key off his own ability, right?
Yeah.
So he can remove his own
villages. He feeds into his
villages.
own rage, yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, I remember I played with the wood spirit from the ancient grove.
Yeah,
this guy actually is able to place seeds out on the board that will eventually be places where you can place shrines.
Correct. You can turn your little seed tokens into shrines or have them explode and take out nearby opponents.
Yeah, I always like variable powers, and this one is the kind where you look at it and you think, well, how could this be balanced? But it all comes together really well.
Every single kami has this basic add and remove shrines in your current village. Other than that, every ability is unique. They have a passive ability, and then they have 3 abilities. 2 of the abilities cost 1 of your action cubes, and they have kind of like a super ability that costs 2 of your action cubes. So that one that's another interesting decision point where you're like, man, I really want to use this, but it's going to be 2/3 of my actions on the first year. And then as you move into that 3rd year, you have 5 actions. You pretty much see everybody using those bigger abilities more consistently. They all have kind of like a hook, if you will. Like he said, there's the little mini game of the rage track here. This character, inherently, most of the abilities just focus on the villages in front of you. So she has the ability to affect these types of spaces outside of her village, but it's relegated to that specific type of space. This character here cares about the fields. This character cares about the forest. That character there wants to, every time he removes something from the board, he's going to move up one of these 2 tracks. So it's more of a little bit of an aggressive strategy.
What about the fear one? I'm very curious about that one. What's the
KURORE?
power there?
Yeah, so similar to the rage spirit they have in front of you, she has a fear track because she is the spirit of fear. As the track goes up, she can pay fear points to enhance her different abilities. It's kind of a kicker cost.
Oh,
Okay,
cool.
Interesting. What are the palaces? I see palaces, 1 palace in each of these locations. What do those do?
So those are the temple spaces on the board, or they're normally known as the village shrines, where the primary kami would be kept in each of the villages. And whenever somebody goes there, they immediately gain their choice of favor or nature instead of being regulated by just field or forest.
Gotcha.
In addition, they get to determine who wins any ties when we're handing out villagers at the end. So it's kind of a control space.
It's even if you're not in contention. So say you 2 were first, and I was like, hey, David, remember 2 turns ago when you removed my shrine? Jeremy, you get the first pick, and David can have second pick. So there's it's an interesting little just kind of minor detail in that I think is pretty cool.
And that's just for tiebreakers?
Yes.
They rule?
Yeah. I mean, that comes up in the area control portion, and then it comes up with the area control portion, which is tied to the actual drafting itself.
What gave you the idea behind the rotating board? Because we play a ton of board games. I can't think of any, besides maybe Zolkin has the rotating gears, a game where the board actually rotates. You're interacting with a very specific location each round. That's very unique. Like, what made you think of that idea?
Well, first I just started with the round board just on paper. I'm like, I'm a new designer. I need to come up with a hook. So I just kind of drew a circle. I'm like, what do I do from here? But I was playing a lot of games with my wife at the time, and we kind of ran into that same issue that a lot of couples do, where if it is a take that game, you don't want to hurt your significant other. And I mean, you see it with parents and children and all over the gaming community. So I ended up just separating the game out into 4 different sections. Like, okay, I'm going to play in here so I can combo off all my abilities, and we can each just focus on what we're doing. And the game just kind of grew from there. And the board just rotated so that we could still interact with each other, because we don't want to be completely separated.
Sure. I can't stress how unique that is, for the fact that when you're playing, typically when you're playing your shrines in these locations, you're only interacting mostly with the area that's in front of you. What's cool is that, as you had mentioned earlier, a lot of these abilities, or some of the abilities, allow you to interact with other locations. So really, you do have to pre-plan ahead. You have to think about what Travis's goal may be by the time that location comes back to me, what I have to think about doing to thwart his plans, or maybe enact my own plans during that same round.
Yeah, there's definitely some timing going on. Even if you can't interact with the other areas, you got at least by mid-game or a little after that, you're going to be looking at the spaces as they come around and sort of timing that with what you can do.
And it becomes super interesting when we played it by the third year, when the board starts to fill up massively. Then you're really taking your turns, not just to play shrines, but to remove and then to place your own shrines in those locations to score.
It definitely gets far more aggressive as the game goes on.
But what's interesting is it's aggressive, but it doesn't feel bad.
No, it
Whereas
doesn't.
like in other area control games, you're like, oh, you wiped out all my guys. It's like, well, you took out my stuff there, but I'm not going to really have that in front of me again for a couple more turns. And because your attention is divided amongst those 4 different villages, you're not going to be able to dominate all the villages. It's just impossible. Exactly. So you're going to kind of pick, you're going to pick your battles. So you're okay. I really want to get this. My character is more relegated toward the river. There are more stilt houses in this village. It makes more sense for me to fight for this. Or maybe the opposite. Maybe it makes more sense for me to fight somewhere else, knowing that I could go for the stilt houses out of season without any issue.
So you're scoring your points during game with the nature and the favor. But are there in-game points too?
Yeah, well, there's the tokens. There's the set collection on the tokens, and then the end points are actually here on the
cards that you've drafted.
Yes. So villagers will have varying end-of-game victory points. For example, I mean, the guard here is worth 2. The peasant is still only worth half of a point, or you need a pair to make 1 point.
Yeah.
Feels like half a point is worse than 0 points in a way, because it gives you the illusion. It really drives home the importance of the draft, because you're like, cool, well, hey, I had 1 shrine in here. Oh, cool, here's your half a point.
Well, but like you said, even then, even still, it makes it so it's slightly less punishing, because if you finish the game and you have 2 of them, it almost feels somewhat satisfying. It would only be bad if you finish the game with just 1 of them. Right?
Yes, exactly. or even 3 or any odd number of them. There's that one straggler that didn't quite get you to where you needed. And then the village tokens themselves are worth 1 point. So even if you didn't complete your set. So really, like as the art would suggest, the idea here is that we wanted to create a game that was interactive, that had interesting decisions that weren't super complex, like AP prone, super complex micro compression decisions within one another, that felt intuitive, that was attractive, and that had a theme that was pleasant, but mechanisms that are, I think, like I said, they're inherently mechanisms that come with almost a negative reputation. And I don't feel like in this game we figured out a way to combat that sort of stigma.
Yeah, absolutely. The game definitely has sort of like a lightheartedness or a whimsy to it that kind of balances out that take that. And the take that, I also, in our experience playing, it's not the kind of thing where I've invested a ton of effort in doing something over a long period of time and then it's all wiped away. It's just a little bit here, a little bit there. It's something that you can deal with. Yeah. And like you said, your attention is divided too, which is kind of brilliant. As this thing rolls around, someone may have done something to sections and you're barely maybe even paying attention to those sections unless you're a really expert player at this. And I remember having times where the board came back around to me and I was like, oh, wait a minute. What happened to
all my stuff go?
Where did all my stuff go? It was fun. It was take that, but it was kind of funny.
Yeah. Well, congratulations. Yeah. I mean, this has got to be super exciting for you. And I try not to give opinions, but, especially for Kickstarter games, but this one looks gorgeous.
We really enjoyed it.
We totally enjoyed this game. Very fun area control style game. Plays 2 to 4 players, ages 14 and up. Going to be on Kickstarter right now, right?
Yes.
So go back it. If you guys have questions about them, ask them in the comments below. I'm going to have these 2 guys make comments or reply back to them.
Hopefully.
Subscribe to us, follow us on Twitter, like us on Facebook. Thanks, guys, for stopping by.
Thank you.
Thank you. We will catch you guys next time.
Bye-bye.
Season 2 of Man vs. Meeple is sponsored in part by Cool Stuff Inc. Cool stuff in stock at coolstuffinc.com.